The term liberal has become extremely demonized in the context of contemporary political discourse in the United States. Despite the reality that the political history and culture of the United States has been largely based in liberalism, the meaning of the ideology has been lost to the general public. Liberalism is a term that can be applied in many contexts, but for the sake of this argument, we will be primarily focused on its political and economic applications. Political actors on both the left and right have tried to dissociate from the word entirely, while still abiding by the ideology's core tenets. When discussed in the context of American politics, most view a liberal as a political moderate with progressive social values. Instead of representing a broad political and economic ideology, it is now used as a way to refer to a moderate member of the Democratic Party, or even as a derogatory insult. The definition of liberalism has diverged from its original meaning as a political school of thought inspired by John Locke that holds the values of liberty, freedom, and equal opportunity at its core. This is not to say that our modern understanding of a liberal is not legitimate, but rather that the word has lost its richness and meaning. It has become practically meaningless in our current political culture, and as a result, the American people have seemingly forgotten the influence and importance of the liberal tradition. Upon an analysis of the origins of liberalism and its different interpretations throughout American history, we can conclude that our modern use of the word liberal is both redundant and it facilitates intellectually bankrupt conversation. Furthermore, we can apply our findings to advocate for more fruitful applications of the term to promote more genuine and productive political discourse in our society.
In the late 17th century, Locke developed his political philosophy, challenging the notion that a monarch's authority to rule over others was divinely bestowed upon them. In two treatises of government, Locke argued that individuals are born with the inherent natural rights of life, liberty, and property, which no government can strip one of. To Locke, liberalism meant government by consent, limited by the rule of law, with all individuals, including rulers, subject to the same legal standards. This emphasis on equality under the law showed a significant divergence from existing hierarchical systems. He believed that legitimate political authority originates not from tradition, conquest, or divine right, but from a social contract, a voluntary mutual agreement among all free and equal individuals to establish a government to secure their rights. If the government fails to uphold its duty to protect these rights, citizens have both the power and the obligation to change or abolish it. This sentiment directly influenced the creation of the American Declaration of Independence. Locke's conceptions of liberalism, grounded in natural rights, government by consent, and the protection of individual liberty, would influence and pave the way for later classical and social liberal philosophers to expand on ideas of democracy, civil liberties, and governance.
Classical liberalism is a political philosophy that emphasizes individual liberty, private property, free markets, and limited government, based on the Enlightenment ideal that society is most productive when individuals are free to pursue their interests. William Graham Sumner embraced this tradition, but, influenced by Darwin, expanded it to model the social Darwinist concept of survival of the fittest.
He argues that greater government involvement infringes upon individual liberty, distorting the natural outcomes of social and economic competition. The central concept of Sumner's work is the forgotten man, characterized as the average, rule-following, working man who bears the burden of the progressive reformers' attempts to help others through welfare programs. He notes, "An honest, sober, industrious citizen, paying his debts and taxes, supporting the church and the school, yet he pays both ways." Sumner's empathy towards the forgotten man reflects the liberal belief that justice requires the equal application of the law rather than the redistribution of wealth. To Sumner, true equality is the equal treatment of all individuals before the law rather than attempting to engineer equal outcomes through government intervention, as that would impede individual liberty and economic incentives. Similarly, Sumner argued that social progress relies on individual freedom and development, not state planning. In accordance with classical liberalism, he believed that freedom entails accepting the consequences of one's choices. With less dependency on the government, Sumner believed society would flourish. Despite criticisms of insensitivity or neglecting to address institutionalized hindrances to achieving freedom, Sumner believed that weaker government dependence would lead to a more just society. Overall, Sumner's beliefs reflect a lasting classical liberal emphasis on limited government intervention and personal responsibility that are still cited and have influenced contemporary conservative thought. Social liberalism, while maintaining classical liberalism's commitment to upholding individual liberties, extends further by prioritizing an active role for the government and promoting social and economic justice. It believes that true justice needs not just legal equality, but equality of opportunity and access to the necessary resources for individuals to prosper. John Rawls, a prominent 20th century political philosopher, reshaped liberal thought through his concept of justice as fairness, a cornerstone of modern social liberalism. In A Theory of Justice, Rawls argues that a just society protects individual liberties, but more importantly, structures its institutions to benefit everyone fairly, especially the least well-off. Rawls's theory introduces the original position, a hypothetical scenario in which people choose principles of justice behind a veil of ignorance, meaning they are unaware of their social and economic status, talents, or values. Behind this veil, Rawls notes that this ensures that no one is advantaged or disadvantaged in the choice of principles by the outcome of natural chance or the contingency of social circumstances. From this perspective, Rawls believes that individuals will choose rules that safeguard liberty and ensure equal opportunities for all. His first principle calls for equal fundamental rights and liberties like freedom of speech, religion, and political participation. His second principle, known as the difference principle, permits social and economic inequalities only if they benefit the least advantaged members of society. He notes, social and economic inequalities are to be arranged so that they are both reasonably expected to be everyone's advantage, and attached to positions and offices open to all. This idea reflects Rawls's belief that justice needs to go beyond equal rights. It demands that social systems actively work to uplift those in most need, highlighting the increased role of the government. Rawls's model stresses the importance of equality and fairness as the basis of a democratic society.
These two branching theories of liberalism that we have discussed have clearly had a profound impact on the contemporary American society. Classical liberalism grew from its roots in theorists such as William Sumner into provocative ideology that ultimately inspired the neoliberal movement under Ronald Reagan. For context, neoliberalism was an ideological movement that peaked in the 1980s that focused on returning the United States to a truly market-based society through the dismantling of many social welfare systems and progressive economic policies. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy describes neoliberalism as a philosophical view that society's political and economic institutions should remain robustly liberal and capitalist, which reflects Sumner's view that government intervention is unnecessary in American society. Similarly, the influence of social liberalism has developed from what was the motivating philosophy of the New Deal to the ideological home of many left-wing American politicians. New Deal-era philosophers such as Herbert Croly believe that the chance which the individual has to compete with his fellows and take a prize in the race is vitally affected by material conditions over which he has no control, and thus the government must account for inherent inequality of wealth. Rawls, of course, re-emphasized the importance of government intervention to address the disadvantages that people face, and now politicians on the left in America today, such as Cornel West, Bernie Sanders, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, hold this same sentiment. All of this is to demonstrate the continuity of the liberal tradition on both sides of the spectrum throughout recent history. What has changed, however, is the willingness of the American people to embrace the word as liberal when engaging in dialogue. Unfortunately, the very complexities that make liberalism so important to American culture have made it difficult for people to understand what it truly is. Those on the right have conflated the entirety of liberalism with social liberal theory, which is how we've ended up with the idea of the radical left liberal. Funnily enough, it seems that those on the left have made the same mistake of minimizing liberal ideology, but instead they have conflated it with classical liberalism, which has inspired the view that a liberal is a politically unmotivated moderate. Liberalism was once viewed as an umbrella term that united theorists throughout histories, from Sumner to Rawls, Reagan, Roosevelt, Jefferson, and beyond. While liberalism in America once represented an array of varying philosophies, the range of people who now identify with the ideology has diminished significantly. Now, we are left with a politically illiterate culture that remains ignorant to its original meanings. A person should not be required to study political science at the college level in order to understand the basics of liberalism, but such is the case in modern America. Liberalism has been the leading political philosophy of the United States since its creation, yet no respect is given to the ideology in the modern era. While it may seem that this argument deals entirely in semantics, the degradation of the word liberalism has had dire consequences on our political culture. The refusal of both pundits and ordinary citizens to realize the complexity of liberal theory has led to a society in which people can no longer properly articulate their own views and has facilitated political discussion in which people talk past one another. Conservatives and progressives have become more willing to dismiss liberals because of our cultural conception that they are useless moderates who stand for nothing. The reality is that liberalism is the primary inspiration for political philosophy in America across the whole political spectrum. The lineage of liberalism has produced a diverse array of ideologies that make up our culture, yet the very complexity of this lineage has led to a superficial hatred of the liberal theory by many of those very same people who actually believe in its principles. One possible solution to this phenomenon would be a thorough restructuring of the language that we use in our modern political discourse. Instead of throwing liberal around to refer to anyone we disagree with, perhaps it could be more fruitful and more accurate to describe the ideologies that we engage with. This problem could be even mitigated by teaching the distinction between classical and social liberalism at a high school level, to at least begin to introduce people to the intricacies of political theory. The hatred towards the word liberal speaks to the decline of political intellectualism among the American people, which needs to be addressed on a grand scale. Basic political theory must be taught in order to allow productive discourse and, even more importantly, to provide a deeper societal understanding of the impacts and implications of different ideologies throughout history.